I think it's time to get going because holy smokes, we're going to be hard pressed to get this volume of great information in an hour. So we're recording, we're rolling. Diane, why don't you get us started here?
Well, thank you for being part of another Foresight webinar. This one today is very exciting because from the series that we've done so far, we haven't actually covered wedge play. And we couldn't have anyone better, put it that way. This is the first of a two-parter. And we'll go into the second part in just a little while. That's coming next week. But we're calling this the art and science of wedge play. And it really is the perfect title because today we are covering the art side of things. And we are very, very happy to be joined by Layne Savoie, co-founder of Wedgecraft. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Liam. I'm excited to present. I've you've seen a little sneak peek here, ready to get started. But again, thank you for having both Rob and I. Rob will be next week.
Yeah, so as you say, Dr. Rob Neal, who's the science guy, and you just said the perfect thing a little while ago. He's the smartest person that you've ever met in your whole entire life. So it's fantastic that you two get to join up and you've created this amazing data collective on wedges that we're going to talk about soon. But when we said the art and science, I think that's probably a good place to start. Tell us a little bit about Wedgecraft, your relationship with Rob, and the side that you specialize in.
Yeah, Rob and I met years ago. I was an NCAA coach at the University of Arkansas and Florida State for a little while. Got to work with some great tour players at those times, like David Lingmerth, Andrew Landry, Brooks Koepka, and we were trying to do player development. That was kind of what I was in charge of. And it just, I kept hearing about the greatest players in Europe working with this guy, and he was down at Doral, and I just dug in and I said, man, I got to figure this out. And so we met at a Danish national team training camp, and I was really impressed. And I said, man, there's a lot here that I don't understand and I've never been exposed to. So I was drawn to it, and we progressed and we kept in touch. He came to Florida State, worked with the team. And then I got out of coaching and I got back into teaching, and I said, we got to do something together. There's a big opportunity in short game. I want to use 3D in a space that really hasn't been captured. It's wide open. It's a blind spot. I mean, I said this before, everybody knows like the gamma and beta tumble of a shaft on a driver, but like you ask them how they get out of the bunker and they have no idea. So it was a little bit humorous to me. So we dug in and we designed a study, and we're really lucky to capture what we feel like is the most, it's the most comprehensive data set on anything inside of 100 yards. And we've incorporated a lot of people that have helped us along the way, a lot of coaches, teachers, and players. So we're excited. We're proud of our work, and we're going to keep going with it. So,
and a good way to think about it is, you said 100 yards. Dr. Rob Neal deals with outside of 50 yards, and you're 50 yards and in. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. And next week, he's the biomechanic. So we're going to be talking about impact and the physics and the maths and spin and everything. But today, and you and I ran through this earlier, and I'm so excited because it's the artistry of playing these wedge shots 50 feet and in.
50 yards, yes.
50 yards, sorry. And we also talked about that.
Yeah. And
being
so
the European.
The unique thing about inside 50 yards is nobody we tested in the thousands of golf shots we hit, nobody made a decision to open the club face really outside 50 yards. So there's kind of a breaking point where open face conditions stop. And then it becomes a very regulated, very controlled maneuver. As far as technique goes, it's very standardized on wedge play. And like I said, Doc's going to reveal our findings there and those formulas, but it's kind of wide open inside 50 because there's not a lot of power requirements. I mean, little kids can do this, old men can do it alike. And there's a lot of options usually on how to get the ball close to the hole. So you see a lot of variety, and people get confused by it. So what we've tried to do is give people a framework to follow and not get lost, and just say, take a step back and say, what's going on here, and let's think about this. And that's what we're going to do.
And so much of it as well, and for anyone that's watching, you know, it's like getting out there and practicing being creative and putting yourself in situations and giving yourself different options, and being creative to try and come up with the best one.
That's right. That's right. So, you know, I'm ready to get started. I know we got a lot of shots to look at and a lot of discussion, a lot of questions. So where do we go from here?
We got Layne, we got the cover slide here of your PowerPoint up for everyone to see. So if you want to start rolling through that.
Okay, so I'm going to give you a little bit of the backstory of what we've done. It was really important to us that we get a comprehensive data set with really high grade players, meaning that we didn't really want to have a tour player. We want a certain level of tour player. And so we try to get all the major championship winners, and we got close. We've got three majors represented here. We've got a world's #1, and we've got a gold medal winner. And so we're missing that elusive Open Championship. So anybody listening, if they know a British Open winner would like to be involved, we'll show up with our equipment and we'll do this. We'll record their data. We'd love to have them. But this is a little cross-section of some of the players we've tested, and that's Duffner and Brett Rumford, who's an icon for the last 20 years for short game. On the European PGAs, Australian, and then of course Graham McDowell and Justin Rose, Tom Kite, Weir, and Luke Donald there at the end. But all of them, it was the joy to work with them, and it was really revealing to kind of take a look and understand what their golf ball is doing. There's a lot of uniformity there, regardless of their age or grip type or equipment. The balls all started to converge. And there was a ton of similarity, which we didn't expect. I mean, we went into it objectively, but it was pretty awesome to see once you do the overlays and you see what's happening when they open the club face or square the club face. So what we did specifically is we got a player, and the architecture of our testing was basically the design of ShotLink. So ShotLink, as a lot of the teachers and players know, they divide things into different distance segments. So there's inside 10, inside 20, inside 30, and then there's inside 50, 75, and 100. So we decided to test those blocks. And so on a testing day, we would basically ask a player, I'm going to roll that fabulous former #1 in the world Englishman up there. We would ask them to hit shots a certain carry distance. And we tested them in square face condition, open face condition, fairway, rough, and bunker. Everything inside 30 yards, 5 shots per set. So that's a lot of shots with a lot of machines running. So we had radars running, high-speed cameras running, and 3D running all simultaneously. It was pretty exhaustive. They're like migraine days to you know, we got to pull it off, and we've got access to these players, and that's what was happening. So this image right here of video would then turn into like an avatar where we can measure with high degrees of accuracy 3 different planes of movement, all the rates and rotations and forces on the club and body, and then the radar of course would measure the ball. So it was important we measured the body, club, and ball and tied them all together in one particular shot, so we had a complete understanding of what happens. And if that wasn't enough, we decided we had some gaps in information, so we decided to try to locate some robots, and that's what brought us to the RNA at Kings Barn, and that's a picture in the top right of the testing and research facility there. Dr. Steve Otto, who's the director of research and testing, was kind enough to, he liked what we did, and he got involved with us, and we designed about 3 different sets of tests that largely revolved around dynamic loft delivery and contact point on the face, and what kind of outcomes that had on the golf ball as you moved around and you change dynamic loft or you change impact locations. But that was very revealing also. So we took all the data, and in the end, we decided that we needed to, get some kind of framework. And so here's kind of the bones of the operation. And like I've said to you, this is not crazy terms or obscure ideas for golf. Everyone has largely seen these and are familiar with them. I think what we've done very nicely is we've connected the dots and made some strong correlations for these items. And so now we can start to understand three-dimensionally and other ways how all the shaft lean and face angles and contact points and speeds and how everything converges and is related. And so it was a little bit overwhelming. It was like an ocean of information, and you had ball data here and body data here and club data there and all these different distances. And it took me and Doc a while. I mean, we've been working at this for 7 years, but I finally came up with a thought. I said, Doc, this is like art. And I said, it's like looking at a beautiful painting. This is a palette. And I said, there's variety and there's color in each and every masterpiece. And I said, so each shot kind of has elements of art, because no two pitch shots are the same. And you have to have the ability to dial up and create these specific elements. So the color palette has to be right. You can't have too much red or blue or yellow. And that's why these things are colored in that fashion. So each shot, in our view, is almost like a mosaic. And there's a certain amount of balance that you're trying to get to, or perhaps imbalance. If you want asymmetry, you need to be heavy on attack angle. You need a lot of red in that image. But that's essentially where we landed. We said this is the skill set for wedge play that are the guiding principles for learning. They're the control variables. So I just ran on like a major mouthful. Does anybody have a question so far?
No, I love it. And I think that when you described that to me earlier, I was like, that sums it up perfectly, because you had said, well, you can't make a painting with all red paint, for example. So yeah, that's why there's all these things that have to go into it. That's right.
And so in the end, we have an intimate knowledge of these definitions, these variables, and we've assigned quantitative values to them. We know what the attack angles really need to be. And so this is like setting the dials. Like what's unique about, let me just give you an idea of how we think about club speed. So if you take an unbelievably gifted world number one with massive power, let's just talk about Brooks for a second. He can hit a 7-iron, maybe 200 yards, and his club speed, just for really simple math, for the sake of conversation, it'd be about, let's just call it 100 miles an hour. And if on a particular shot that he would need to create, he would want to dial up a 7-iron that carried 191. So Brooks could do that. He could modulate his speed to deliver maybe 2 or 3 miles an hour less, which would be the requirement, but he's not comfortable doing it. He likes staying wide open at a very high threshold and hitting stock shots if he had his way. So a lot of shots wouldn't fly 191, and he couldn't deliver 3 miles an hour less club speed. But that's a 7-iron from an extremely talented individual. The same requirement for speed as it appears with a wedge is you got to fluctuate your speed from 15 miles an hour all the way to 75 miles an hour, and you have 400 and 500% of clubhead speed change. And that's not anywhere else in the bag. That is not occurring anywhere, but it has to happen at a great degree of precision with wedge play. So I can go on, and that's a different discussion on the deep dives on these control variables, but that's a club speed illustration.
I have a question for you, Layne. As I'm looking at this, I love the painting analogy. So I'm starting to think about the color wheel and back to art class and how I used to mix things together. Any great player always has these functional matchups, but I'm wondering for the, golfers out there that are getting ready to go to short game range afterwards, and try and put some of these things to the test. I'm going to be seeing a couple people on here tonight, actually, looking at some of these names. Are there certain ones of these fundamentals that exhibited greater variability than others?
Oh, well, they're kind of like a taxonomy. Attack angles on top. It's the most difficult one. It has perhaps the most change.
Okay.
I don't know. Attack angles in degrees, club head speeds, and miles per hour. And so percent change, club head speed's hard to keep up with. But aside from that, as far as like the alignments at impact, not the force of impact,
Right.
attack angle is really difficult. It's hard to measure,
Yep.
but we know how to do that, right? We know how
Yep.
to measure attack angle.
Yep.
And some items are better than other for measuring attack angle, but I think we found a good one. And it's hard for people to train that way. It's not everyone has a radar that can tell them what their attack angle is. It's hard. I think it's easy to be steep and create a steep attack angle, and it's hard to. It's easy to create a super shallow one, but it's hard to feel the differences or what you're doing to create that middle zone. And there's a big middle zone. I mean, you're having attack angles from about -1 to probably realistically -20, 25 on any particular terrible lie in the rough at wing foot. So
yeah,
that's a big requirement. And that's not necessarily the case with face angle and club pass. So I would,
okay.
Your shaft lean's only going to change in the neighborhood of less than 20, but attack angle is big.
Yeah, okay, no, that's good. That's I was thinking down those lines, but wanted to have confirmation before I volunteered any opinions, because I do find that that's when I feel like some of the great players, I've had fortunate opportunity to spend a bit of time with people on your last slide, and two of them in particular I find have done such an unbelievable job of controlling angle of attack and contact point. It's just fun to follow those guys around the golf course.
It is like the precision is incredible. It's surgical. I tell people it's like they're brain surgeons, the way they use the club. And so kind of moving along through this process, we came up, we had stuff come at us where we had big ideas, and it drove me crazy. Like, I don't know what stops the ball around the green, and I couldn't figure it out. And so I had to take a step back and kind of recalibrate, what's going to be the right approach here for me to figure this out. And so we got with a physicist in Australia that Doc knew, named Rod Cross, and he's like the world expert in oblique strikes. And so he's the type of guy that like Wimbledon hires and says, where did that ball hit the tennis court relative to that line at that speed, and what kind of softwares can you develop that can support that. And so he's really good at collisions of flat surfaces and round surfaces. And he has done some work in golf, but he was really intrigued by what we were asking him, like what stopped the ball on the green. And so we had some big discoveries there as it pertains to stopping power. That's just a phrase we use, but some things emerge. And so you have kind of three different zones of stopping power. We see that you have to have the ability to have a steep land angle inside 20 yards. Even though your spin per yard is highest, your spin ratio is highest, you have to have the ability to do a steep land angle, because even though the ball is spinning per yard higher, the land angle is so shallow with a square face that the tour greens won't stop the ball. And so tour players have to be a master at open face conditions. And then you say, well, open face conditions gets to be somewhat high risk at some point, right? Like, you don't want to be hitting 35-yard flop shots.
You've been working with too many good players if you're calling it somewhat high risk, Layne.
Yeah. So at that point, you kind of get in this gray area where spin thrives. And although here's what's happening, that the ball is not hit hard enough to warp its ball flight with pressure and resistance in the air. So it's like a parabolic shape. And so if that's the case, you only start changing that at about 50 yards and beyond. where the ball would have an apex and then steepen into the green. So if you have a uniformity of land angle inside 50 yards, then you have to be able to spin the ball tremendously to stop the ball, because all the land angles are virtually the same. That makes sense? So the people that could spin the ball the most have the greatest advantage.
So I'm going to, let me see if I can throw out some, hopefully not disappointingly generic statements, but you can kind of go yes or no to see if this is a simple starting takeaway for some of the golfers out there to kind of take and use this. So if I'm going out and I'm going to be practicing inside 20 yards, don't worry about trying to spin the ball. Just, understand that if I want it to stop, it's going to stop by a steep angle of descent.
Well, I would say different. I think you have to get, I think people, developing golfers, tournament players, anyone who has aspirations, you got to get your square face stuff up and down. You got to pitch it close to the hole from the fairway. Like that's your free throw in basketball. We got to make those if we're going to be competitive. But then you have that's like your housekeeping. That's basic maintenance on your game. But then you have to learn how to develop open face conditions and get good at them and understand the different speeds you can swing, the different places on the club face you can hit it. And because there's so much variance, your different shaft lean components. And so you have to spend a lot of training time in this space. Mm-hmm. You have to do a lot of open face conditions if you're going to get the ball up and down on harder golf courses.
Right.
For sure.
And then like when I think about this for 20 to 50 spin rate, yeah, absolutely. And I'm now thinking about my normal club golfer, let's say like 6 to 18 type handicap. When I start to think spin rate and I'm looking at your color palette over here, thinking, gosh, contact point. I see a lot of fluctuations, spin rate and contact point, and a lot of people would that be a myth that hitting it solid is going to spin it more? Like, is that like the first thing, right? First thing I would see for amateur golfers, like, I want to spin it more.
No, that's a myth. Okay. So think about this. If you hit a ball solid, your smash is higher, correct? So the ball comes off the ball comes off the face faster. So the energy transfer is high. But we also know that to create spin, you have to have speed, correct? So the higher the speed, the more you can spin it. Mm-hmm. So what you're trying to do is create a lot of speed with a low energy transfer.
Yep.
And so what that requires you to do is actually have like a programmed miss hit. You're trying to hit the ball out on the toe, low on the face, like these guys do. And then you can start to swing harder and harder, and the ball goes the same distance as a square face. And so you're cheating physics, but it's by design, and it's not easy, but that's what's happening when you see these crazy shots that spin back from like 40, 50 yards. These guys have figured out it's like using harmonics on a guitar. They're using the tool a little differently, and they're cheating the system with the intention of creating a profound effect on the outcome. It's not a standardized deal. And so contact point's really critical actually in this zone, whereas you'd never try to hit a 75-yard shot off the toe, because then you can't predict the energy transfer, and you don't know what your carry number is, launch, spin rate, trajectory, all those things. But in this zone, you really want to have the ability to control contact point.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's I think, again, super useful takeaway for people, especially, most of the people on here have a device that measures contact point regardless of club head speed. Knowing what you're looking for there is pretty good use of your tech.
It's crucial. It's crucial, really understanding that and really wiping the face clean. Every shot, having a dry golf ball, all of that is so important for spin generation. Doc's going to speak to those points next week. But when I do short game teaching, I am a hawk right on top of my player, right on top of the balls. I wipe the club. I clean the balls. Everything is dry. I mean, if it's an early morning lesson, I might as well cancel. Like, I don't even want to do it because you can't spin the ball.
Yeah.
And so that's how kind of we think through the spin rate stuff. And then finally, you hit the ball hard enough to where, you know, it launches at, you know, probably a sub 30 condition. Pretty fair to say. It's going to be somewhere in the 20s, depending on the style of shot they're hitting and the loft they're using. But eventually it's hit so hard, it climbs so high in the sky that you get a really steep land angle combined with a very high spin rate because of the ball speeds and club speeds involved. And so that's your maximum. That's maximum stopping power. That's why those guys are laying up at Augusta on 15. They're hanging back at 75 to 90. They're not getting down to 40 yards and keeping their fingers crossed. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So that's
how
that's how you move through what you're trying to do as far as getting the ball close to the hole and where do I train and how do I train, and really let's get specific with it. Now the fun starts. We're kind of through the basics here of kind of talking about the academic elements of what we've done. I know people like looking at great golf shots and watching tour players. I was watching the coverage last Sunday, and I caught it late. I was kind of busy, and then I caught the back nine, and this happened. And I've been thinking about it ever since. I'm not sure I've seen a greater short game shot really in my lifetime. Like the things that he had to do to create this blow my mind. I mean, he didn't even know how to stand. He spent like 2 minutes trying to figure out if he could stand on the slope, him and his caddy, got two people working on, and then he finally grips down to, you know, way down on the shaft like this, and the elements of this shot, the complexities, and you know he doesn't practice this. I mean, there's no way this guy practices. It was all instinctive. I mean, it's crazy. This is like a lunar landing by Neil Armstrong. When everything's going wrong, he pulls it off. It's awesome. So, and let me tell you, this is what's going on with the loft. Can you guys see me? Am I in the frame?
Yep. Yeah, we can see you.
Yep.
All right. So I was telling you guys earlier, I've got a simple, this is illustrating the loft plane. So this is a 56-degree wedge. And if I hold the shaft vertical, there you go, you got 56 degrees. Now to aim loft, when your loft is, or the ball is about chest high, you choke down the shaft like that. Let's just say I'm aiming at this white stripe on my wall between the windows, okay? Here's what's happened. If I hold the shaft neutral, and I'm like this at address, which is probably a common starting point to hit a pitch shot, that club face is pointed like 30 to 45 degrees left of the target. So he has to turn like so. I've pivoted my body, which he's done. Look at where he's aimed right now. And you have to be comfortable pitching the ball what appears to be like 50 feet right of the pin. And he knew that. Like, he understands that. That's the brilliance of it.
Yeah, I think it's if he was using a 60-degree loft wedge, wouldn't it be something crazy like for every degree it is above his feet, he's got to aim 2 degrees to the right?
Yes.
Yeah, like I'll get one of the guys watching, David Sauls, check my math on that, but I love that you pulled that out right away, because yeah, I don't think many people have practiced in conditions like that where they'd even know where to begin.
I just think it reflects his complete understanding of how to aim loft, and he disassociates the grooves from where they're directed or his body line. He, like Savoie or anybody else who's ultra creative, he just understands he's got to aim the loft in the right direction where I want the ball to go, and that's the law. So it's a super, super fine illustration. I mean, insane stuff from Matt Wolff right there. I was pulling so hard for him to make that putt. But I mean, think about it. He's trying to win his first major. He's one shot back the lead on the back nine, and he does this. I mean, that's profound. That's like an athlete in the flow, as they say, right?
Have you since tried to replicate that shot, or at least give it a go?
No, I'd have to go to wing foot. I don't know where I can do that in Birmingham. So, all right. So moving along, we've got, I want you to just kind of watch this for a second. The reason why I picked this out is because both of these balls are going really short distances, okay, in the air. Let's just think about this for a second. The one on the left maybe goes 10 yards. The one on the right actually goes shorter. It might go 6 or 8 yards, but they're in our category of inside 10. ShotLink would have them inside 10 yards on carry distance, okay? The differences in the control variables here are astounding. Like the amount of shaft lean that Jordan is using on the left is in the neighborhood of like 20 to 22 degrees. Because I've measured this and looked at it. Just, I mean, not scientifically, we didn't have a sensor on his shaft, but it's unbelievable how much shaft lean he incorporates. He loves using shaft lean like that. That's a comfortable style for Jordan. It's a preference. But then on the other hand, oh, and last thing on the left, his club speed's probably in the neighborhood of 15 miles an hour because he's got so little loft. He doesn't have to swing hard to make the ball go, right? Now on the right frame, that's one of the most insane shots I've ever seen. And he's probably got club head speed in the neighborhood. Doc Neal thinks it's 60 miles an hour. I'm afraid to say that. I'm going to say 50. Okay, but either way, he's got about 300, at least a 300% change in club head speed, and the balls are going approximately the same distance in the air. But they have drastically different ball behavior, launch angles. And so you say, what's going on, and how do I even follow this? And I said, you know, you got to go back to the control variables, and you can dial it up systematically, one control variable at a time. You can do the inputs and you can create the formula that replicates these shots. Mm-hmm. And it's, you know, we're all familiar with Homer Kelly, Liam?
I'm gonna guess not. See, I guess Homer Kelly penned the Golf Machine. For those of you out there that don't know, it would, it's a late 50s.
Probably.
Yeah, that's late 50s, you know, regarded for years as kind of the, would you say maybe the blueprint for matchups within the golf swing?
Yeah, that's probably right. And so people immediately took that as very, very difficult. I can't read it, I can't follow it, I can't understand it, etc. Yep. But he always responded, well, complexity is better than mystery. And so all I'm trying to say is I'm giving you guys a blueprint. By no means do I think the control variables are easy, but if you follow the control variables, there's strong messaging, you can create these shots and you can learn them and you can teach them to your students. So that's kind of the take home there, why I pulled this up. Now, interesting, just look at the different release patterns. That's the same, approximately the same location in the hand path. And look how wildly different the position of the club is, his body. I mean, it's just amazing how I mean, we're talking about dynamics. That's what we're doing. We're talking about the ability to really change how you use a club. This is the same club. That's what's amazing. You don't have to do that with any other club, but wedges, you have to be able to have a huge range. And if you don't, you're going to paint yourself in the corner and you're only going to have a low pitch shot and you can't get stuff up and down or vice versa. If you're only steep, it only works like 20% of the time. And so you're not a good short game player. And so the guys that thrive in all the conditions week after week after week, they can manipulate those dynamics. They can go up and down and they adapt to each shot and the requirements. Moving along, we got maybe my most favorite modern player for a long list of reasons, but he is phenomenal with a wedge, especially inside 50 yards. And by the way, he's done it his entire life. He didn't learn it last year. I mean, he is a once in a generation guy, I feel like, with a wedge, like a virtuoso, really.
I tell you what, speaking firsthand, you know, when I was still playing professionally, my off-season training ground was SCGA, now Rancho, California. So I've been watching that kid since he's like 12 years old, and you are 100% correct. It is freaky good his whole life, like demoralizing to the
Yes, yes. And so let's look at this shot a few times. Let's take a close look at what happens at impact. And I know there's a lot of rollout here, but look at this divot. So obviously we have a really steep attack angle. The reason by which I think he's on a little downhill lie by that drain. I mean, he's at the bottom of the slope. Everything's funneling into the slope. He probably has loft taken away from him, and he wants to guarantee a good descending blow. He's got a 60 degree. He's got a massive amount of shaft lean. Okay. Obviously, he's very comfortable in mega shaft lean mode. And what's really interesting, and to speak to the intellect component of it, I find it interesting his choice of landing spots. Did we notice that his landing spot is the only flat spot in the entire golf shot? Like, that's the only thing flat. And so he's utilizing the fact that he knows it's a very predictable bounce and ball reaction. And that's your first choice. You don't want really to bounce it into the slope if you could avoid it. Now, sometimes we can't avoid it, but man, just such precision on such a beautiful shot. He's checking the ball into the upslope of that hill, massive amount of break. I mean, he makes it look very easy, but this obviously is incredibly difficult to do. And pitching it down to gimme while he's leading the tournament from what's really, I don't think a lot of guys are going to get the ball up and down from, and they're certainly not going to pitch it that close, but I love every aspect of this shot, obviously. So now we got Ricky at the PGA, Harding Park. We've got the same club. And again, let's just focus on the differences here. He's super shallow. He wasn't shallow in the previous swing. Okay, the ball is probably not sitting down. There's some air under that ball. There's a little cush. If the ball was sitting down, he would have really had to dig, and you would have seen a thump at the bottom, more of like a Watson at Pebble Beach in '82, left a 17 when he chipped in, and the club just stops. That's a super steep attack angle producing that. This is nice and brushy through the rough, and it's not like 2 or 3 shallow, but it's shallow because he wants to get the loft plane on the ball. And so you got to remember, like, here's what's different about a wedge too. Look, am I on fit camera again?
Nope.
Oh, yep. Sorry. Yeah, you're good. You're good. Sorry. I muted myself
right
there.
So people think of a club face like so, like, oh, I can hit this, right? Well, that's a driver and that's a 7-iron, but they don't set up to the ball like so. And so in the end, you have a little ribbon of club face to use. You don't have this, even though that's what's on the club. But the way the angles work are this way. So that's why it's very easy to hit way up here when you open the face in the rough, or way down here, because that's just millimeters off. It's not like, oh my gosh, I hit it 2 inches away from the sweet spot. No, we're millimeters away when you have this orientation at impact. And so you better be shallow. If you take that little rib and you start coming into the ball extremely steep, you're going to have wide-ranging results. You could, I guess, occasionally hit one good, but you better be careful. When you open the club face and you get mega steep, you better have the ball at the bottom of the rough, and you better have a good low point. But that's kind of what I see when I look at this shot. It's just an awesome illustration of just an open facer. The last one across the green was a shut face as well.
I think that's the third time I've heard you talk about great players and having the ability to shallow. I always figure if I hear someone with your breadth of knowledge say something 3 times, that's pretty darn important. So that's like a hint, everybody.
Yeah.
Get that in your notebook. All right.
News bulletin, learn how to shallow a wedge. So moving along, we've got Ricky. And I really like this just because it's a high speed from Phoenix face view. And this is a little bit of a brain twister. People really struggle with 2 concepts we're watching here. He's got mega shaft lean in the 20-degree neighborhood. Okay. Mm-hmm. He's getting probably, well, there's a lot going on. I wouldn't want to speculate a spin loft, but it's probably north of 50. Okay. But he's got 20 degrees of shaft lean. So he's got to be uber shallow. And if you want to really learn how to spin the ball and check, which pretty much everybody that comes to me for a wedge lesson wants to do, how do you spin the ball? Well, that's the technique formula. I mean, you can buy half the spin formula. You can have great fresh grooves on a wedge with a premium, urethane ball. I mean, you're going to, the balls they make these days, they're designed to spin. All right. So you can buy half of it, but then you start combining these elements where you learn how to be shallow off the fairway with a lot of shaft lean. There's a hard time with the disassociation between the two. Most of the time people do shaft lean, they bury the hatchet in the ground, right? So in this case, it's just a really nice illustration of how much precision Ricky's got there. It's really, this is pretty standard stuff from tour players, by the way, not unique to Ricky. Maybe the high top with the Velcro straps are unique, but not the technique. So, again, moving along, we've got finally a shot in the desert, obviously, and he's taking his 60. Now, this time, he's in the face of the hill, and I think there's it really speaks to, like, obviously how precise you got to be. I mean, why land a ball on a curved surface if you could land it on a flat surface is the first question. So if you can't find a flat spot, then you got a problem. Now he's a long way away he's short-sighted, and he's a long way away from the surface too. So really he's painted into a corner. He has to hit a perfect shot. So what is required? He's got a lot of shaft lean again. I mean, that's 3 illustrations of like 20 degrees, in the neighborhood of 20 degrees of shaft lean. He's shallow. He's pinching it right in the sweet spot because he doesn't really have to get stupid here and try to mishit it low off the toe. Okay, that's unnecessary. He knows the stock launch angle and spin rate will kill it in the hill and trickle it up. But it just shows you the precision, the creativity and precision. His instincts are always spot on. And that's what I appreciate about him. Just wide variety. He's always kind of hitting the right shot. It's not like he's trying to do any kind of extra flair, no showmanship. He has high skill level, so he can spin the ball typically more, but he can do stuff basically other people can't. There's no question. But this is a really nice piece from Ricky as well. Even though it looks rather mundane, I appreciate it a lot. It's a nice painting from my perspective. And then let's just look at the body of work here out of Ricky. A lot of variety and a lot of different techniques. I mean, there's a lot of shaft lean, but you get shut face positions, you get open face positions. You get no shaft lean or minimal shaft lean. You get shallow attacks. You get steep attacks. I don't think he's varying the contact point very much, but obviously the intellect is working overloads. I mean, he's doing all kinds of stuff with the golf ball, massaging this golf course and working it down. And it's really nice to see that. I think it's rare from even on the PGA Tour. But here's where my mind goes when I watch this. And I say, well, how can people learn this? Like, what's going on here? this is where I go. So if you look at the setup position compared to the finish position, I spoke a lot about impact, but I want to just say, look, really simple, strong messaging. You got to be able to understand how to aim the loft. And that, you know, going to the Matt Wolf illustration, we got to learn how to open the club face and not get confused about where the loft is pointed, because that's really what's going to dictate the direction left and right of the pin, and furthermore, the launch angle. And then you got to have a keen understanding. Am I on camera again?
Yes. Yep. We can see.
Okay. When we open the club face, that lead edge rises, and we start to have to deal with a lot of issues on bounce and ground interaction that we're going to have to balance. But the easiest way to do all of that is just look at where Ricky is on these finish positions. And again, this is not unique to Ricky. Time and time again, I see Tiger do this. Over and over again, I see Jordan do this. I see only the best do this, by the way. They stick this like 730 position where the handle is, you can see the handle's left, it's hidden in all the frames. The hand path is left. That means, in my view, it's not so much the direction it's going, it just represents connection. His arms aren't away from his body. His body is rotated, and because his body's rotated, the hand path has gone around the corner to the left. Okay. Number two, the club is supported in front of him. It's not wrapped around the corner and you see that club flailing out of control. And that, I mean, I give so many high handicapper lessons. There's a complete blind spot for what's happening after impact. They cannot, I stand right in front of them, like, you know, the Mac O'Grady thing. I stand right in front of them. I say, do not hit me with the club.
Oh, God.
Do not hit me. And it scares people, but that's why I do it. So you say, look, we got to control the club. We got to control the low point, the loft, the rotation, the connection. And so there's a strong message for what you see out of Ricky. And then lastly, the most understated thing of it all, and nobody really realizes, I've never heard anyone say this. Doc and I got deep in the weeds in this thing before we realized it. There's a ton of extension in the spine occurring on these shots. There's a lot of standing up, and that is the shallowing mechanism that prevents the lead edge from gouging and digging with a lot of shaftling being used or steep attack angles. You can shallow that thing, okay? It's happening before impact. Like this is happening right about the time when the club gets to parallel to the ground, their head starts moving up. All these guys, not just Ricky, all of them. Mm-hmm. You have to have the ability to stand up. Now, you can't do that on a 75-yard shot or a 350-yard shot very effectively. I mean, VJ, there's some exceptions to the rule, but this is one of the magical components of VJ. He was just so strong. He could get out of posture and get early extension on all those things and still carry at 330. But then so it's like he was hitting a driver 330 realistically with like a flip wedge technique. Like that's beyond, like, that's so strong. Like, we spent a lot of time around VJ in 2004 when he won 10 times. That was like, Duffner was like his lucky charm. So there was a lot of practice rounds during those days. And he would mess us up, like in the head, like a story with Chris Cox. We play, I was teaching Chris and Duffner in 2004. And VJ was on this tear, and he figured out Duffner was his lucky charm. And VJ's very superstitious. So he said, you're meeting me at English turn. We're playing Tuesday practice round. Well, Shell Houston Open just finished late on Monday. He shot 61 or 62 on that Monday to finish the tournament. He wins. He flies into New Orleans. He says, let's do a practice round money game. He loves the money games. So he shoots 61 in the practice round, and he was 13 under after 17 holes, and he duck hooked it in the water on 18, and he ended up shooting, he made a double on 18 for a 61. But later in the week, he also shot like 62 at English turn later in the week. And so we would see these shots he would hit and the magic of like being number one in the world. And it's limitless, like what he could do with a wedge. And he had a lot of these elements I'm talking about, a lot of them. You can see it in that movement. Everybody knows the way VJ moved the club. So we learned a lot from him in those days. Even though I filmed it, I couldn't measure it. I would just watch it obsessively, and then I'd ask him questions and just try to keep up.
It's amazing.
Right.
Do you want to get onto a couple of questions then, Layne?
Yeah, let's do it.
Well, first up, and there was a lot of questions that came in, and we'll kind of like umbrella them all together. But with golf, it's constant evolution and everything. Club technology, the ball, course layout, technology that we use to track and understand. But how has that affected and influenced wedge play throughout the years?
Well, that was the primary thing, that trend in golf where power is becoming more and more prevalent. I saw this starting to change around 2010, and nobody knew what was going on, but I sensed it was equipment and athlete combination. And so, the bomb and gouge effect started to occur. And I just knew as a calculation that somebody better figure out what's going on with a wedge, because these guys are going to hit 400. And every time they do, Oakmont, Wingfoot, Pebble Beach, Carnoustie, it doesn't matter. They're going to have a wedge in. Mm-hmm. So they're not going to redo, these golf courses. And so there has to be an intimate knowledge about what happens with loft, and the greatest players in the game are going to have to address it. So similarly, it's like a serve and volley approach in tennis, that you master the serve, and then you approach the net with massive speed, and then you have all this nuance and touch, and no two volleys are the same. But I think that's where we are in golf. I mean, you look at the Finaus and the Chambeaus and these guys like Jason Cochran and Tyler McCumber and all these guys, like some of which you've never even heard of. Their club speeds are insane. They're over 125 miles an hour. And I think in 5 years' time, the 112, 115 guy on tour is going to be pretty limited. They're going to have very small windows of opportunity and success. So I think that it not only did it drive our study, I think it's driving golf. I think people have to figure this out.
Yeah. That seems to be the way it's going anyway, especially after watching Bryson at Winged Foot.
So a question for, and this is on behalf of the viewers, because I think absolutely, power's become prevalent. A lot of amateurs out there are looking, they now have access to go look at their kinematic sequence and look at their ground reaction forces and get driver optimization done. Is there any like overarching key difference between like how I should set up and hold my driver to maximize power versus hitting these short finesse wedge shots?
Yes. Yeah.
Like what would just be some low hanging fruit for someone who's like, okay, I got to shallow the club. I know I need to do that. And I should hit it off the toe with a lot of club head speed. Do we want them taking like?
Don't try to do that unless you're on tour. Like let's avoid the off the toe, path left, open face, mega shaft lean blend.
Okay.
That's like trying to. Yeah, that's a little too. The easy stuff.
Yeah.
The easy stuff is like go to the side of the green, and all right, for finesse, go to the side of the green and learn how to feel like you're standing up and hit the ground at the same time. Like, can I coordinate that movement, and how precise can I get by my head going up?
So right, where I can actually go and back, where you're seeing guys moving up and out. So this one's not, we don't want that one.
No, that's the death move. That's the death move. Everybody thinks you got to keep your head down. You got to do the opposite, and you have to rotate. You got to rotate. And so go watch simple stuff like Luke Donald pitch the ball, or VJ Singh, these guys, some of which I've mentioned. Ricky I've seen Ricky's head go up 4 inches before impact. Like he just, and take a divot. I mean, so there's a real element to learning that. And then I think after you learn the movement, you draw a line in the sand, go to the bunker and say, well, how good can I get with my low point? Where I present the club is important while I do this.
That's awesome. I love that.
Okay, so that's the learning progression. But then you got to do the opposite somewhat on a fairway wedge. You got to be Lee Trevino. You better get in side bend, and you better have shaft lean. And the more shaft lean you have, the more the head's going down. And you better be able to do lead wrist flexion and all these things that are quite different.
I have a feeling I got a lot of biomechanical translation coming up next week with Doc.
I know, I was going to say next week.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah, what else we got?
Again, a few people have asked similar questions. Like, you're going to get fit for your driver, and you're fine. You can do that indoors. But how important is it when you're getting fit for wedges to be outside?
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a piece that's really important to a lot of different parties, all the manufacturers, all the radar people. We're trying to figure out how to do that, but to really get it done today, you're going to have to go off of grass, and it's important to get the ground interaction. And you want to know, when I do a wedge fitting, I want to know what golf course they're playing, how often they're playing it. Like, are they on zoysia? Are they on grainy Bermuda? Are they in tight, wet, bent? All those are relevant questions, because if they play their primary golf at that golf course, that's the sensitivity you got to have for ground interaction, and you're not going to get that indoors. So the grass and the firmness and the moisture, and so like little things on grass, like obviously zoysia is very stiff and upright and very waxy leaf, and the club slides and the ball's presented really high on the face, and it's like, a Bermuda grass is a rhizome. It grows sideways. It doesn't want to stand up. The ball sits down. It's soft. And you break it up. It's all different challenges, and so I think that has to be discovered through some fitting. I think you really at the moment need to be on grass.
So if you spend your summers in Toronto and then you go play golf in the winter in Florida and your wedge play sucks, it might actually be the wedge.
There could be some aspects of it that are the wedge. Yeah, I would go to the control variables first.
Yeah.
And say, what is going on here? So, yeah.
And then obviously using like Foresight technology, someone else asked here, and it's always a question that we get no matter what we're talking about, but what metrics or data points do you look at when fitting wedges for better players?
Yeah, so what I love about using the quad and the Foresight piece is the accuracy. I think it shows and displays time and time again on short shots using the components of spin loft, and so it's done an awesome job with attack angle values and dynamic loft values. And then if you can get those captured, then you could start to understand kind of the spin mountain and the shape of it, and what those values are and where you land. And so I think that with a little bit of discovery there, constantly focusing on dynamic loft delivery in conjunction with attack angle, that people can start to unlock a lot of spin because of the mapping the spin mountain essentially.
Okay, good way to put it.
Yeah. So it's like it's a little bit like a topo map. You're just going to have to feel it out. You're going to have to go up and down those slopes, because you go over the slope and you hit a shot that you think it feels good. It's very similar to the previous shot. It doesn't spin at all. It pops up.
Yeah.
And so you get to this cusp where you're so close, and you just go off the other side. And by the way, it's shaped more like that.
Yeah, it falls off quick.
And you're so close, but you got to rein it in a little bit, have a little more shaft lean, a little shallower, and you won't hit the pop-up that doesn't spin.
Yeah, and just for people out there that aren't familiar, when you hear Layne talk about spin loft, he's looking at the difference between the angle of attack, how much down or up the club is traveling, and then how much actual loft is on the club. And, you know, as those start to separate, you'll see increases in spin to a point. And
That's right.
then, you know, it's kind of like driving off a cliff.
Yeah, they're like gears. They grind, they interact with each other, and the ball and the face create pressure only to a point. You can't swing a club at 87 degrees aloft and expect to catch pressure on the face and spin generation. So just as an illustration, so at one point you're creating a lot of spin, then you slip off the face, and that's the pop-up, we'll call it.
Yep.
You might like this question. Do you do private instruction?
Yes. We do private instruction. So I'm in Birmingham at Greystone. I'm with Mark Blackburn, and he's been an awesome mentor for me, and I'm in a great spot. It's a lot of fun to work with him, and congratulations to him for PGA National Teacher of the Year. So I'm in a lucky place. I've enjoyed my time there.
Great. Liam, I don't know if you have anything else to cover, but there's one more question that will be good to end on.
I mean, gosh, my last question is mostly about when we get you back on, because I think we might have scratched the surface, maybe almost. But I mean, I love it. You know, I mean, as a golf coach and still working with players, I love the chance to learn. I love the process that you've taken to discovery. I empathize with technology headaches, know all about that, but you know, it's for the people that are out there that don't, it's difficult to appreciate the volume of work and dedication that goes in to uncovering the truth that Layne and Doc have. And you know, I, for one, appreciate it. I think the whole golf industry appreciates it. And I know we're going to get some fabulous reviews. And I think it was in the poll I launched, I think it was 90% of attendees are now significantly interested in Wedgecraft. So I'll pass that on to you.
Job done.
Hey, to that point, it's important, you know, I do a lot of things well. I do some things terrible, but it would be a terrible mistake not to present to you this piece. So this is where people can find out more information. This is our product Doc and I have put together, which is it's a wedge play intensive that goes over 12 weeks. It includes 30, 40 drills and activities to do with wedges. And so it's a drip subscription. You'll get maybe about 18 minutes per week over 12 weeks at wedgecraft.com. And that's our current product, our digital product that like I said, is a drip subscription. And we're working on more content right now. That's about 3.5 hours of information that largely goes over some of the stuff that we discussed, but in a little more detail.
And I just went ahead and put the website out in the chat. So definitely would encourage everyone to check it out. I still remember sitting next to Doc in a PGA meeting. What's the price on that one? Because
it's $5.99 a week. So
come on, people! Are you
know,
kidding
right?
Me? Like what? Like it's ridiculous. I love it.
Yeah, it's
awesome.
That's where we are, and I think it would be lost on people not to kind of explore this space. I mean, it's a unique product. There's not a lot of drip subscriptions, and there's not anyone that's done this comprehensive piece on wedge play and assembled this. So I can assure you, you'll get better players and coaches alike, whether it's instruction or this is kind of done in our maybe Golf Digest vein. I mean, we try to pull back. I'm always trying to pull Doc back, as you know. I'm trying to do like literal translation. Like, Doc, you can't say that word. What does it mean? And how can we reframe this? So, yeah. So this is our plain language product, but we have a bunch of ways we can go. We have scalability. Awesome. We have a lot of information.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, look, it's I really appreciate you coming on, sharing 1/10 of 1%, and can't wait to have Doc on next week. One of the questions in the Q&A, if you sign up through Foresight social media. You'll see stuff going out on Twitter, on the email list, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, Layne, thanks again, man. That was awesome.
I know, thank you.
I had a blast. Thank you, Diane and Liam. Anytime, just let me know. I'd be happy to come back on and pull some more shots up and go through it with you again.
All right. Until next time.
Well, hello to everyone and welcome to the next in our series of Foresight webinars. Now, this was a two-parter and we did the first part last week, the art and science of wedge play. And we had Layne Savoie on last week. So we were kind of looking at the art side of things. And today we're moving on to the science. Layne last week kept referencing the doc and being his partner in crime and the smartest person that he knows. So look at you being all modest. He's on today, the other half of Wedgecraft. It's Dr. Rob Neal. Thank you for being with us today. And we're excited to delve into the science behind Wedgecraft.
Thank you very much, Diane. Thanks for the invitation, Liam, to do some work with you guys and share some of the things that Layne and I have been digging into over the last 7 years. I might throw up my screen now, Liam, and get this presentation going.
Absolutely.
And so what I'd ask people to do as well, if they have questions along the way, then certainly throw those into the chat window. Liam and Diane are going to be monitoring that. So if we can get to some of those questions, then that always makes the experience a little bit more interesting than just listening to me for 55 minutes pipe on about distance wedges. So again, what Layne covered last week was the finesse wedges, those shots that are close to the green, maybe inside 30, 35 yards, something like that. Distance wedges, on the other hand, are the ones that fall into the category of probably greater than 50 yards and as far as you can hit your probably pitching wedge. So for tour players, that's 50 in the range of 50 to 150 yards. For mere mortals like me, that's probably closer to 125 yards is where my pitching wedge finishes, and maybe for the club golfers, there it might top out at 110 yards or 100 yards. It doesn't matter, because the techniques that we're going to talk about will be appropriate for any clubhead speed that you are capable of generating. And one of the other points that Layne made also was that as opposed to where you look at clubhead speed, I mean, I'm never going to be able to these days generate 125 miles an hour of clubhead speed, and therefore I'm not going to be able to hit the ball like a Brooks Koepka or a Rory McIlroy or a Russell Knox or someone like that, because I just can't generate that clubhead speed anymore. Even if I could when I was younger, there'd be some question marks about that even. But with wedge play, and even to the distance wedge lengths, every golfer and every person who's watching this should be able to generate enough speed to hit high quality wedge shots. So it's not a speed requirement. It's about how you're going to deliver the club. And that's an important message to get through to the audience today. And then again, Layne gave you the backstory. And if you want more of the detail of our search into this space, then I'd encourage you to go and look and listen to part 1 of the series that was done last week, and get some of Layne and my history. Also, all of the people that we contacted and are thankful for contributing to our understanding of wedge play.
And the web address where you can find Layne's webinar and all the Foresight IQ stuff is now in the chat.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's perfect. So I think Layne went through this whole deal, how we can change the video image into an avatar, and we've got launch monitor data and so forth. And he talked about the control variables too, how you blend all of these elements to create the appropriate club delivery for any particular wedge shot. Now, with the distance wedges, so again, I'll remind you, that's probably greater than 50 yards. We're going to focus primarily on shaft lean, club speed, a little bit on contact point, but not so much. And then being a bit careful with our attack angle. So Layne talked about in finesse wedge play how it's really important that you be able to change your attack angle. That's less important in hitting distance wedge shots. But these other two variables, shaft lean and club speed, are incredibly important. And so that's where our focus will be today, and understanding some of a little bit of the science that underpins the ability to create flighted wedge shots. And Liam, I'm going to just kind of throw you on the spot here. Not that we've discussed this at all, but if you have a look at a tour player hit a wedge shot, whether they've got a 60-degree wedge in their hand or a 56 or a 50-degree wedge shot, could you describe the trajectory of that type of shot?
Ooh, I would say it's typically flighted, I think, like a penetrating, stable ball flight.
Yeah,
is what I would say.
Great description. So relatively low launching, and we need a lot of spin on the golf ball to hold that trajectory. I mean, that what I'll call it backspin. What backspin does for an object in flight is it gives it stability, so it's harder to move it offline. So a ball that doesn't have spin on it can float away and be more susceptible to the elements than a ball that has a lot of backspin on it. And so, for example, in soccer or football, American football, when the quarterback throws a spiral, he puts spin on it so that it'll hold its trajectory and get to the intended target. Or the kicker puts backspin on the kick so that it will not curve as much and not be influenced as much by external environmental variables. So the same applies in flighted wedge shots, our distance wedges. We need a lot of spin on them, not just to stop them when they get to the green, but to hold them online and at the target that you're desirous to get to. So then begs the question, how do you get spin on a golf ball then? And we're going to head down that space just shortly. So this slide, I'm going to skip over. We may come back to it. It's a little bit about how we stop the golf ball, but what I wanted to do is get to this one first of all. So the outline for today basically will cover these topics here: friction, dynamic loft, a little bit on attack angle, only so that we can understand spin loft, and then ultimately how we stop the golf ball. All right. So let's get right into the whole friction conversation by, first of all, just looking at some high-speed video here. And hopefully this all pans out and plays nicely. And you can see it, that golf ball is being hit by that beautiful Titleist wedge there. But I couldn't find good, really high-speed footage of wedge impact. I've got high-speed footage, but it's just not light enough, and so it wouldn't make a good visual. So you would know that this is what we would call an oblique impact. And what do I mean by oblique? Well, there's an angle that the club face is presented at here that's different to the direction that the club's moving. And so it will impart a force that will cause the ball to spin or to rotate. Okay, so this is an example of oblique impacts, and there's the point of first touch there. So the face, this relatively flat surface, impacts the circular surface or the spherical surface of the ball, and the direction the club's moving, depending on whether you're hitting up on it or down on it. Hopefully with your wedges, you're hitting down on it. And so that's the direction that the club is moving along this way. And the ball will always leave at an angle somewhere between where the direction downwards of the club's moving and where the face is pointing. So that would be consistent with the D-plane motion. So in order to understand spin, we just need to have a quick look at this little diagram here. I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time on it, but you just need to understand a tiny bit about it. Okay, so this black arrow here is the force that's primarily determining how far the ball will go. And that's called the normal force. And it's normal because it's perpendicular to the face. So I know that Layne got his orange stick out and talked about face angle last week. And so if you put a rod normal to the face of the golf club, that's basically that black arrow there. And that essentially measures how much compression you get between the ball and the club face. Now, if we ignore the compression that's taking place in the metal of the club head, which is appropriate for wedges, not so for drivers, but for wedges, that's fine. That's a reasonable assumption. All of the deformation that's occurring is due to that normal force there. And that's what holds the ball on the face. So during the impact, that normal force is what's pushing the ball, deforming it, and holding it on the face. If that normal force gets small, then the ball will slide along the face rather than gripping it. All right. So this normal force is going to be very important. And you see this little equation here that says the frictional force, that's our red arrow, that's the one along the face, is proportional to the normal force and this coefficient of friction. So how slippery the two surfaces are or how well they grip together. So we can only create friction if we have a normal force, and the size of the friction is going to be dependent on how big that force is, and then also how large the coefficient of friction is. So if the coefficient of friction was close to 0, then our frictional force will be close to 0. And just before we move on to studying this a little bit more deeply, I'll give you a practical example.
Oh, thank goodness, Doc. I was just about to chime in and go, hey, can I call timeout and ask a few DGP questions?
Okay, so we'll get to those if you have them. But
all right,
I'll give you a little example. So when you hit a shot from the rough, and you could have your wedge or it could be a 7-iron, doesn't really matter. And there's a little bit of grass between the club face and the ball, and you make contact. You make a nice swing, you've got good contact, and you go, oh, that thing's just exploded off the club face. And you call it a flyer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what's happened there is this coefficient of friction here. Let me see if I can grab the pen here and circle it. This coefficient of friction in this equation suddenly got very, very low. And so, yep, we don't have the grip on the face. This thing comes off almost where the face is pointing, and it doesn't have very much spin, and it just is flying. So that is perhaps my best example of a case where you lose friction,
mm-hmm.
and the ball jumps off the face.
Yep.
Other example I can give you in the kind of the opposite direction was when you watch a tour player hit a really crisp wedge shot off a firm, tight lie, and it comes out super low. And,
Right.
and in fact, what's happened there is that ball has gripped so well on the club face that the trajectory or the launch angle gets closer to the path of the club, in fact, the attack angle. So it brings the flight down, not because you lent the face forward or you lent the shaft forward a lot, it's because the friction grabbed the ball and sent it out closer to the path. Does that make sense, Liam?
Yeah, it does. So I just, it helps a lot. So I'm thinking, I'm sort of trying to almost build like a list in my brain. So if I'm thinking about things that are gonna reduce the friction, reduce the spin, I've got, grass condition, from the amount of grass that gets between the club and the ball. And there's, there could be different types of grass, different, all that kind of stuff. What about moisture?
Yep, definitely.
Yeah. Okay. So that's, is that where, on the dewy morning, you could get a little bit more spin with less loft because you're going to be able to have more friction?
Yep. So
sort of.
Yeah,
kinda.
it's kind of in that ball.
Yeah.
Ballpark
I'm trying to, I'm DGP, right?
Yeah.
And then increase. So the Tour Pro ripping that wedge down, that kind of friction launch, bringing it down.
So the other part to it, Liam, again, the more speed you've got, the more that normal force goes up, and so the more spin you'll get.
Okay, that makes sense too. What about, and I know this might be out of scope, but is that I'm thinking about when I hit that shot, pick a clean shot out of the bunker and it gets just a ton of spin. Is that increasing this coefficient of friction there? Or is that
what you're doing
totally
there?
different?
Yeah, it's slightly different, but it's
basic
ultimately
principle.
if you're getting lots of spin on the ball,
there's
then
some
you've
friction.
created lots of friction.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Awesome. Let's keep rolling then.
Okay. So if we go to the DGP question.
Here we go. So I just launched the poll. So there's a couple other questions, but if everyone sees question 3 is specific to this slide. Now, I have a question for you. So when I'm looking at this, the difference in carry for a wedge shot hit with 35 degrees dynamic loft versus 55 degrees dynamic loft. Do we have
everything else the same?
So can you tell me how far the 35 degree one carried?
Yeah, but I'm only looking for the difference in carry. So let's just pick a reasonable number for club head speed. So let's say 65 miles an hour.
Okay. All right. That's what I was looking for. So 65 miles an hour.
Yep. Same attack angle, same club path, same contact point. The only variable that we're changing is the dynamic loft.
Okay, we got our first couple answers rolling in here now. I think we might have some people scared here, Doc. We got so far. Oh no, okay, we're ticking up here. We got five answers in there so far.
Just give people a little time to think about it. I mean, when I first thought about it, I way underestimated the differential.
Okay. So when I first saw the slide, I picked C. Just because no, and then once I went away from my multiple choice guessing, my standard thing, anytime I get someone like yourself that's asking a question, I figure out what is my gut instinct and then how far away can I get from my gut instinct, and that's what I'm going to end up picking. So yeah, we got over 50% of respondents here so far. This is really good. The most popular answers right now, 20 yards and 30 yards are tied. 40 yards is pretty close. We got a couple bold guesses at 60 yards. We got 23 votes. 75% of people voted. 24.
That's good. So we won't.
All right.
We won't belabor it at all. It's just a really nice talking point to get to how important loft variation on distance wedges actually is, right?
All right.
So if we just nut it down, we've got exactly the same club delivery, and we did this as an experiment on a robot, by the way. So we've got empirical data, and then you can go and do some theoretical models if you want to. But basically, every degree of change in dynamic loft equates to about 3 yards of carry. And I think everyone in this audience can do the maths on that one. So 55 minus 35 is 20 times 3, 60. So about a 60-yard difference.
All right. We had, there's 2 people out there on this webinar that are pretty excited right now getting that answer.
Yeah. So I think that was enlightening, because before I actually did the work, I thought, oh, yeah, it's probably 30 yards difference. You know, if I swing my 60-degree wedge or my pitching wedge, oh no, it's actually more than that, isn't it? If I hit them full, yeah, it's going to be more. And so we thought we better do the experiment and find out. And so in our control variable hierarchy, in distance wedges, control of dynamic loft is the most important thing you have to do.
Yeah, I love it. I love the framework you guys have built. You know, as I've looked at the evolution of golfers, you know, from our mid to high handicap, and we might have a few of those on our webinar, right up to tour pros. You know, I feel like there's this evolution in things the player needs to control. You know, the first is like contact, basic low point control, developing some sort of stability to club path. And then, you know, these elements of face control. And I feel like what these world-class players do day in and day out, you know, a lot of times subconsciously, but they're controlling the speed, trajectory, and spin. And that ability to control the spin, I feel, is what separates the great from the good. Because you know, as you touched on earlier, it's just the ball can be going the exact same speed, but if I have a variance in the spin rate, I get totally different outcomes.
Yeah,
so,
you're completely different.
Awesome, love it.
So these are the actual experimental data. The dots are the different dynamic lofts that we measured during the testing. So the 50-degree loft down there was actually with a 60-degree wedge. So, you know, we've simulated shaft lean on the robot, and then the 35-degree dynamic loft would have been a 45-degree pitching wedge. So basically, that's how the numbers look. How do you simply sum this up? You go, all right, the more I lean the shaft or the less loft that I deliver at impact, the further this ball is going to go. So if I'm going to be good at controlling my distance with each of my wedges, I have to become very consistent in how much loft I deliver with each one of them. All right? Because if I am variable with the loft that I deliver, then simultaneously I have to generate a different club head speed to get the desired distance. That's an extremely complex problem. It's like a calculus problem that you're asking your body to solve during the downswing. And it's too hard to do.
It's like asking a golf pro to write an Excel script.
So in coaching, Liam,
yep,
you're going to be teaching people how to control distance with their wedges. I should say Diane as well. The first port of call is to get them to learn how to deliver the same amount of loft each time. Now, it doesn't mean that you and I have to deliver the same amount of shaft lean.
Right.
but we have to be able to do whatever we do consistently well.
Well, I love that because it's such a simple, actionable item for, whether it's a coach or a Foresight user out there, because it's simply go and, hit a series of shots, go into your data table and take a look and see, what is the consistency? What is the standard deviation of the loft you're delivering? And you can, like, the first thing is just start to track it, see what you're doing. And yeah.
Yeah. So again, just in a very practical sense, if you're using your launch monitor and you're measuring dynamic loft and your standard deviation is plus or minus 1 degree, which is very good, by the way, you're still going to have an approximate variation of plus or minus 6 yards in distance. So your shortest one would be 10 feet short. Your longest one's going to be 10 feet past. That's if you kept everything else the same. So it's a very, very sensitive to loft.
What's the most consistent you've ever seen from human?
The best tour players are plus or minus about 0.4 of a degree.
Wow.
That's crazy.
I know.
And it's kind of cumulative. So if they're plus or minus 1 mile an hour with their club head, and then let's say 0.5 degrees with their loft, and a couple of millimeters with their contact point, then overall their carry distance is going to be plus or minus, maybe it's 3 yards or 4 yards, and that would be typical of a tour player in this space, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't hit it exactly the same each time. And look, they can show better results if you had them hit 10 shots in a row to the same target. They'll show better consistency. But if you make it like a variable task, then that's when you really know how consistent they are and what their likely miss would be on a golf tournament or in a golf shot.
Gotcha.
So, all right. I think we've belabored that one long enough, and we'll go to the next concept, our spin loft mountain. And I'm going to take a little shot at some of our radar-based friends who came up with the spin loft mountain. And their initial stuff came out that this was a symmetrical graph, so that the left-hand side looked exactly the same as the right-hand side, and it peaked at 45 degrees. So it was really nice and smooth. And I guess as a first step in understanding this stuff, yep, that's okay. But in reality, we have a very skewed mountain. So let me describe what's going on here for the audience so that they know what I'm looking at and they can better understand it. So at the beginning on the left-hand side of the graph here, we have 0 spin and 0 loft. So that would be the most direct collision you could get between a flat surface and a sphere. And this thing will have no spin on it at all. Right? As we start to change the amount of loft, and loft in this case here is referring to spin loft in the golf language. So Liam, again, I'll throw you under the bus here. What's spin loft?
It's the difference between the angle of attack, the vertical direction of the club, and the loft on the club.
Exactly.
All right.
Perfect. Thank you.
Well done, Liam.
So, and I like this kind of image for people as well. So if you put your hands flat like this, and they're both together, my right hand is going to represent the attack angle, and my left hand is going to, the one with a watch on it is my left hand, is going to represent what the dynamic loft is. So as we go up that white line, we're separating these two. Okay. Until we get to the yellow vertical line. And so spin is increasing and spin loft is increasing up to the yellow line here. And then something really quite different happens after that. We keep increasing the spin loft, but we no longer get more spin on the golf ball. So the spin declines even though the spin loft continues to increase. And Diane, I'm going to throw this back to you there, not to test you, but do you feel like that was a reasonable description of that people could understand?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Right.
I understand it.
So, so Doc, I always kind of think of, you know, what used to be taught as a symmetrical wedge. I don't know. Can you see my background?
Oh, yeah.
I feel like it's like that old Price is Right game where, you know, it kind of keeps ramping up and up and up and up, and then boom, it's all gone.
Yep. Yeah, it's a bit like that. So then the background graphics makes this
Oh, it's going to
kind of
grab
interesting.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to see if I can somehow change my.
I might be able to do some acting out here for you with the.
Oh yeah, that's great. Thank you. Layne.
Yeah.
So yeah, you get up to a certain point, and then you hit the jackpot, and it goes back down to zero almost, right?
Right.
And it goes really quickly.
Right.
That's an important message. So you slowly get more and more spin possibility as you climb the mountain. You get to the top, and then this is like the north face of what is it? El Capitan.
El Capitan, yeah.
And it just plummets down. So you lose your spin very, very quickly after that. Now, it's Layne and my view that this is the red zone here is where most amateurs spend their time. They deliver too much loft, and they have a Surlyn covered golf ball. And so they're always encountering slippage of the golf ball on the club face. And they get high launching, low spinning wedge shots. Right? The pro side of it is more in this green zone here. And in here, we've got good grip, high spin with low risk. And that's that last piece is an important thing as well. Because if I get the wrong dynamic loft here by a couple of degrees, it's not going to ruin the golf shot. Whereas on this side of the mountain, if I get the spin loft wrong or the dynamic loft wrong, it's going to be a disastrous effect on the result. So low risk, high spin, low launch, and this is just the opposite.
Now, that's a really, really useful description. I really like that. I'm wondering for the users out there, I don't know if you can see the line I'm trying to draw, but is there any like, is there a number that we could attach for around that thing? Yeah. What's good? Oh, hey, it's like we planned this.
You just set me up there just perfectly.
All right.
So that's it. About 57 is the top of the mountain. And most of the golf pros, the touring professionals with whom we've worked, they don't get too close to that unless you're asking them to hit really highly specialized shots. If you ask them, you know, what they would do in a tournament, they'll stick in the 53 to 55 degree spin loft zone, just in here, Liam.
Wow.
That's the safe zone.
Fascinating.
And just, again, to kind of complete the exercise for people, I've notionally put different lofted clubs along the way here. So, you know, a 24 degree spin loft might be something close to a 4-iron.
Right.
38 like an 8-iron, 46 pitching wedge, something like that.
And sorry to cut you off. I just also want to make sure for people when they're looking out there, the number here is not the dynamic loft.
No,
it's the
that's
difference.
the static loft.
It's the okay. So okay, got it. So it's static loft on the club.
Oh, that's
But
what. So no, sorry.
Yeah.
Let's draw back here. So this number here corresponds to this point on the graph, right?
Yep.
So 46 is down here as well, 46 degrees of spin loft.
That's what I wanted to make sure. So for the people out there, when you're hopping into your simulators and you're going to start messing with stuff, I don't want you to be delivering 46 degrees of dynamic loft with your pitching wedge.
Correct.
I want to make sure, I want you to make sure that you look at the difference between your angle of attack and the loft on the club. That's what's corresponding to the numbers here on the chart.
Yeah, so
right.
in the studio, you'd be looking at your effective loft and your attack angle, right? That's how that's right. I think that's the language that Foresight used, right? Or they just have on the LCD or the LED panel of the quad, they just have loft, and that's correct. The dynamic loft.
That's
right?
correct. That is loft, right? That is correct.
Yeah. So your spin loft is the difference between that number and the attack angle.
That's right.
Just as a warning for the people, there's a sign difference normally between those two, right? The dynamic loft is a positive number and the attack angle typically is a negative number.
Yep.
So you've got to be careful when doing the maths there to get the spin loft right. So just as Liam said, it's the difference between the two. So let's say your attack angle was 10 degrees down and your loft was, let's say 40 degrees, then your spin loft would be 40 minus 10, which would be the same as plus 10, 40 plus 10 or 50, right? So just, I don't want people to think, oh, wow, my loft was 40 degrees and my attack angle was 10 degrees down. That means my dynamic loft, my spin loft was 30 degrees. Oh, I need to get more spin loft if I want to spin the ball more. Just be careful of that if you're going to do this little exercise.
I have a question. I don't know if now's the right time to ask it, but to do with shaft lean, do you find that amateur golfers don't have enough shaft lean, or what's the biggest issue that you see with them?
It's a great question, because I think when you go to high level players, maybe some of the problems that they have is that they want to lean the shaft too much, drag the handle, all of those sorts of things. Mm-hmm. But that's not the typical amateur problem. Is the typical amateur throws the club and doesn't deliver an appropriate amount of shaft lean. So the real thing to do then is as a golf coach, you go, well, or as a player, is this my technique and it's really ingrained and I want to hit good wedge shots, what do I do? What's my solution? And as far as I can see, there are a couple of solutions and maybe somewhere in between. One is that you change your technique so that you learn how to lean the shaft forward. And anyone who's taken lessons or has done any coaching knows that that's it's a long journey. Let me put it that way. Mm-hmm. It's not the easiest thing to learn if you haven't started out young and learned how to do that. If you don't have a lot of time to practice, but you still want to hit nice wedge shots, then one possible solution, if you don't lean the shaft very far forward, is to choose a different set of wedges, not necessarily the set of wedges that a tour pro or a high-level amateur would choose. Like if let's go extreme here. Let's say the best you can do at impact is leaning the shaft 5 degrees forward. Mm-hmm. And we know that for great distance wedges, you need about 15 degrees of forward shaft lean. Then I'd be suggesting that your wedges should reflect that 10-degree difference.
Okay.
So instead of having a 60-degree wedge in your bag as your most lofted club, maybe something closer to 50 would be more effective for you, because the way you're using that 50-degree implement is closer to what a tour pro will do with a 60-degree wedge. So
yeah, I think that's some really useful advice for people that struggle on the technique side, is they've got the opportunity to measure, you know, and if we know what the loft needs to be to create the shot, it gives them a chance to go and be a little more creative in how they actually do it.
Yeah, so now it kind of, it doesn't help you at the other end of the bag, because you're probably going to be still delivering too much loft with your 4-iron, but at least, you know, you have the capability then of producing excellent wedge shots. And I'm pretty sure Layne hit on this point last week as well. The type of golf ball that you use makes a big difference to your ability to spin the golf ball and launch it in the right window as well, because the urethane covered golf balls perform very differently to the Surlyn or hard covered golf balls. All right.
Okay.
So let's see how we're doing. We need to get moving pretty quickly. So this is what a trajectory of a distance wedge would look like. Low launching, fairly steep landing angle. So the landing angle is over here, probably closer to 45 degrees. The launch angle under 30 degrees, if you want to have some numbers on it. And as I have mentioned already, the key variables, well, I should have club speed up here, because that's the thing that will then change the distance that you hit the shot. But you as a player need to be able to control the shaft lean first, contact point. Now, with these shots, we need to get pretty close to the same point on the club every time. And depending on how high your skill level is, it may or may not be the sweet spot of the club. Sometimes the tour players will purposefully hit it slightly below the sweet spot of the wedge, because that it's like a little bit of insurance for them. It minimizes the risk of them getting grass between the club face and the ball and messing up their friction. It's not because they do it for generating extra spin or something like that. It's about insurance, being able to get a predictable result. All right. So shaft lean, I don't think that we have to do anything big in terms of defining that. Just make sure it's forward, and 10 to 15 degrees of shaft lean, and you're going to be in the right ballpark for all of your distance wedges. Contact point consistently from the same place, and that'll give you a consistent carry distance for any given club head speed. Right? So we've got some video here to look at now of some of the best players in the world hitting distance wedge shots. Okay, and everyone would like to be able to create that same ball action on the green that Adam Scott does here. I think this is the 10th hole at Riviera. Throws it in there, gets a little bit of help from the contour of the green, and spins it back to the flag. All right. So what you will see over the next series of videos that we have, Liam, is a very consistent way in which these players deliver the club. And some of the videos not face on or target line and things like that. So it's not the classic golf coach footage, but it's important to realize that even on these shots that go fairly high, there's still a substantial amount of shaft lean at impact. All right, here's Justin Thomas hitting a 75-yard shot at the British Open. And watch the ball action here. This is kind of a really high skill level distance wedge here. And the ball behavior that you're seeing here is what I would describe as the classic distance wedge ball behavior, in that there's that one reasonably large hop forward on the first bounce, then a check, and comes to rest. And this particular shot, Justin Thomas hit a cut. You can see the club path is well to the left on this one. And now the ball spins a little bit to the right towards the hole. I would say more often than not, they've got a pretty neutral path on a standard shot, and it doesn't spin left or right. It just one hop and stop type ball action.
I hope this isn't too demoralizing for people out there, but when I was transitioning from amateur to professional, I realized the importance of this one hop stop wedge, and it only took me about 3 years.
You were a fast learner then, Layne.
Well, but I don't have access to this information of how it actually happened.
Well, I'm going to ask a question. That's probably a good time to ask it, but it sounds
Let me
simple,
see if I can pause the video so it's not too distracting you.
What stops a ball on the green? Like, what causes a ball to stop?
That's a great question. Now, how do I stop this thing? I can stop sharing, but I don't want to do that. If I go forward, it's just automatically plays. That's how we do it.
There we go. There we go.
Yeah, I got the control up. So we'll leave Jordan up on the screen there and try to answer the question Diane has asked. So what stops a golf ball? I'm going to give you some analogies here that might help you to understand, and then you can almost answer the question yourself. So imagine that you're on an outdoor basketball court. It's bitumen or concrete, and you make a bounce pass with no spin on it. And there's no one but the fence on the other side of the basketball court. Where will the ball finish? Well, if you just to make a straight bounce pass down to the ground at a, say a 45-degree angle, no spin on it or anything like that, where will the ball finish? Layne, any guesses, or Diane?
I gotta
Go forward.
Exactly, until it hits the fence, right? And then that's what stops it. Right. Well, let's imagine now that as you're pushing the ball down to the ground for this bounce pass, you put a lot of backspin on it. I'm sure people have done this, maybe even inadvertently. So when the ball hits the ground now, instead of just bouncing forward at about 45 degrees, it might bounce straight up in the air, or if it has enough spin, it might even come back to you, right?
That's how I was taught to make a bounce pass, was actually, when I make a bounce pass, was to have it bounce 2/3 of the way towards the person, and you release it thumbs down to put backspin on it so it kicks straight up into their hands.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, right.
So it's not the spin that stops the ball. Friction stops the ball, but the spin is what helps to create the friction and at the ground. So when a golf ball lands on the green, there's friction between the outer surface of the ball and the green surface. And that's what stops the ball. And the more backspin it has on it, that means that the faster the edge of the ball is going into the grass that's going to stop it. And so the bigger the frictional force. And so that gets that one hop and stop behavior. Now, the firmer the greens are, Diane, the more spin you need to stop the ball. So when the greens are soft, which is more like what amateur golfers play, the land angle has a big influence because the ball embeds into the green surface, and so you don't need very much spin. And that's why you can get away with playing golf on soft courses with hard covered golf balls, like a Surlyn covered golf ball, because you don't need the extra spin to stop the ball when it lands on the green. And I always think about why amateur golfers don't do so well at a US Open, for example. And it's not because these guys are not skillful. I mean, they're really, really good players. To get into a US Open, you have to be a phenomenal golfer. But rarely will you see them near the top of the leaderboard. And it's primarily because they haven't had experience on those really firm, fast greens, where you have to go to the next level of skill to be able to control the landing and finishing points on your wedge shots. And so the amateur golfers probably are reasonably close to the professionals in terms of how far they hit the ball, where they hit the ball, that sort of thing. But when it comes to controlling their wedges around the green or hitting distance wedges into the green, they're just not in the same caliber, and so they can't really compete on that. So, but to answer your question very quickly, Diane, it's friction that stops the ball on the green, just like it's friction that creates spin. And the more spin you have when the ball lands, the quicker it's going to stop.
Okay.
So that's why it's another important factor. So we already said that backspin or spin on the golf ball gives it stability in flight. Spin is also the most important variable for controlling the stopping distance on distance wedges. This is some great footage here of Jordan Spieth hitting about 120-yard distance wedge shot. And you can see, and I'll see if I can pause it down at impact. So that's pretty close to impact there. I'm not very good at drawing straight lines on here, but we'll see if I can kind of show you. That's probably close to 20 degrees of forward shaft lean at that point. Now, it's not the perfect camera angle because that ball is a bit too far back in his stance, so it's exaggerating it a bit. But this is what you need to look like if you want to hit distance wedges the way Jordan does. And he is as good as anyone at this stuff. So I think that the take-home message is, try to get this shaft lean. And we've got to talk a little bit at some point, Liam, about how we
how do they do it?
That shaft lean as well.
Well, I mean, I think I'm just looking at this one of Jordan and, thinking back to my struggles. And while I don't have the 3D information, I am absolutely positive I did not maintain that torso rotation.
Yeah. And look, you can argue that Jordan's technique has some idiosyncratic things about it. Like he doesn't keep really good connection between his left arm and his body. And you'll see better connection in some other equally good wedge or nearly as good distance wedge players. But Jordan's just become really good at this technique. But one thing for sure we should try to do, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment, Liam, and maybe do I have any control of how large that image is for the audience or not?
I've got
speaker view.
I've got you speaker view, so you're as big as I can get you.
Good, that's exactly what I need. So the connection I'm talking about is left arm for a right-handed golfer to chest as you're rotating through. So what we would encourage is to pin your left arm against your pec and allow the rotation of the body and extension of the upper body to control the shaft lean. And that whole notion of feeling like your wrist stays bowed, while it might, just go down a little bit here, like you're not going to be like this at impact on distance wedge shots because that club head's moving pretty fast. But that might be the feeling that you need to have because that club's going to go past your hands at some point. So some drills you might do is some one-handed shots. So you're holding your left arm against your chest, rotating through and just hitting some small shots to get a feel for that connection is one of the activities we would recommend for that sort of.
I like that one.
And then the other one, I'll do it while I'm here, Liam.
Yep.
I'm sure you've seen this at some point, right, Liam? With
Yeah. So you've got
there's an alignment stick coming out of the shaft here. Not so easy to see, right?
Yeah, but it gives you a nice reminder in the ribs if you go and flip it, right?
That this creating the background was going to cause such an issue.
Here, I
wonder how
got,
quickly I can change that. And anyway, with the alignment stick, if you start releasing the club too soon, you'll start hitting your ribs with the alignment stick. So this will really help you to keep your body turning through impact, but also stop you from flicking your hands past and creating too much loft at impact. So that'll help you control your dynamic loft better.
yeah, and I found even I've got a baseball bat here, but you know, you can imagine if this was a golf club. I've even had a ton of success in people getting early feels by having it and just pushing the butt of the golf club into their torso and starting to pivot this way and just get a feel of what it's like. Because I can tell you, for the amateur golfers out there, it is a very abnormal feeling to have the torso rotating so much through the shot. And I think that is the most important thing for most golfers, to kill the flip.
Yep. Yeah, agreed. So I'll go back, and how much time have we got left? Not much time.
Hey, we got
a little bit.
We got as much time as you need to get through your stuff, man. Don't worry.
Okay.
Don't worry.
All right. I wanted to get to some of the other things later that are, if I can go to the next slide here. So slightly different techniques, so not as much wrist hinge, but look at the rotation through the ball. Great torso rotation by Steve Stricker here. And this is a phenomenal piece of footage of Jordan hitting a distance wedge at the Manchester Layne facility up in Massachusetts here, and super high speed, high 4K video.
That's awesome.
And you'll see as he comes down through impact here. This is a 120-yard shot. You know, maybe I can speed it up a fraction, but you'll see how well he rotates his body through impact here, and then really get a sense of how low this ball launches.
Oh, wow.
And look at the finish here. So the hands went way to the left and just dragged.
Yeah, you can see the left elbow popping out before the club head even.
Yeah, I mean,
just that's impressive.
Yeah, the
Who's,
chest is so rotated. Yeah.
I'm looking at this. I'm especially the last one where you had Stricker up there. I had the opportunity to be coaching a player who was in the same group at a practice round out at Spyglass a couple of years ago as Stricker. And I hope that player's not watching, because man, did I pay a lot of attention to Stricker hitting the half wedges. It was just so good. I'm like, oh God, this is maybe the only chance I'm going to get to watch this. I go, what's he doing? And it was so good. Who would be some of the people with it would be good technique to copy, like some good models?
For distance wedges?
Yeah.
I
mean, I love watching Weirzy, and spending time with him.
And Justin Rose is very, very good with a distance wedge.
Okay.
I think Rory is better than people give him credit for with his distance wedges.
Okay.
I think he's as strong as anyone, actually. Dustin Johnson these days is really good with his distance wedges.
Anyone's really good doing stuff in a really odd way? Is there some I think about full swing, and there's so is the distance wedge, is there more variability than some of the stuff we see?
I think there's way less variability in the distance wedges.
Okay.
And for example, the finesse wedge play by various people, and then also in full swing.
Okay.
You just don't have really the opportunity to do that much different because of the length of the swing and then the requirements of how you need to deliver the club. So I think probably less variation there. Liam, the main reason I showed this slide was just to highlight that ball action of the the big hop forward. And then as it lands on the second bounce, it kind of stops pretty quickly from there. And in order to get that ball behavior, you have to have enough backspin on the ball so that not all of it's taken off on that first bounce. So that's why high spin is important there. Right, maybe this slide and one more, and we'll wrap it up, Liam.
All right, sounds good.
Might just move this out of the way. I don't know if you see that stuff on the screen or not, but what I did last year was a little experiment with two different launch monitors, a radar-based device over here. So all of the bluey green spots are with the radar device, and the purple spots are with the GC quad, right? And what we're measured here is the dynamic loft at impact. And I had 7 different ball types, different construction types. Well, not exactly 7 different types, but the ones that you need to remember most are numbers 4, 6, and 7. Those are the premium golf balls, right? So premium golf ball, like a TP5, a Titleist, the Bridgestone or the Callaway ball at the top end of their price range. And you can see the radar device here. The dynamic loft measurements are all over the place. So we're down as low as just over 34 degrees, all the way up to 39, 5 degrees difference. And the person who hit these shots is a really high skill player. This is not me hitting them.
It was not me.
It's a tour level player. So when we see these same measurements on the GC quad, we have a 2-degree variation in dynamic loft. Mm-hmm. And each one of these spots then represents 10 shots. So it's not like this is just one shot.
Okay.
So this is the average of 10 shots.
Yep.
On each of these ones. So you go, wow. That's why I have over the last few years been using the GC quad almost exclusively for wedge play, because I am much more, well, I can believe these numbers for dynamic loft. Mm-hmm. I cannot believe these.
Yep.
So what the radar device is saying, because it doesn't measure dynamic loft explicitly, is it's predicting what the dynamic loft is based on the launch angle. Mm-hmm. So it says, oh, this shot launched high. This was a Surlyn covered ball. This was a hard golf ball. Oh, the dynamic loft must have been high. Mm-hmm. Oh, wow, this one launched really low. These ones launched really low. Oh, they must have really delivered not very much loft there, or lent the shaft a long way forward. And I would say, no, the technique was pretty consistent. The fact is that the radar device doesn't measure dynamic loft properly, and it's just based on an average algorithm, and doesn't work so well in this short space. And the other thing, just to top it off, is it is extremely rare where the GC quad misses the data. Mm-hmm. Like, well, if you put it in the spot where the cameras can see it, it'll give you a result. Whereas the radar devices, they often miss these.
And I think for some of the people out there haven't gone through the Peak Level 2 program, we do cover how technology functions pretty in depth. But to give you an idea what's happening, the high-speed cameras on the GC quad are measuring the information, the inclination of the club face, at point of touch prior to any, deflection of the collision. And then it's measuring the ball data independently. I think, Rob, similar to yourself, once I, through doing research, uncovered a very similar thing to this. For me, it was with axis tilt.
Right.
You know, that's kind of where we ended up going. So a radar system is going to have to calculate club face projection, so be it dynamic loft or face angle, based on the combination of the trajectory of the golf ball and the direction the center of geometry of the club is going.
Exactly.
So
yeah. And I'll just maybe leave this little video to run here. This is one that Layne put together that talks a little bit about our Wedgecraft digital download that people might want to access.
Absolutely, they should want to access it. So far, we have, let's see, on this poll, just over 80% of people want to access it.
Oh, that's good. Right.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
why don't you, you know, Layne touched on it a little bit, but I think it's a really neat format that you guys, you know, have come up with, drip feeding people. So you're giving them enough information to practice. What is it, for a week? And then
yeah, about a week. Yeah, some stuff to work on.
Yeah.
I don't know why I can't get this to play now. Oh, there you go. Yeah, so there's 12 weeks. That's $5.99 a week, so it's not expensive.
That's $5.99, not $599.
And what happens is that every week you get about a 15-minute video, and it gives you a whole bunch of drills and activities that you can try yourself in order to improve your wedge play. There's a little bit of theory, a tiny bit of discussion on some things like friction, how important it is, but most of it is aimed at you improving your own wedge play. And so that's the ultimate goal of it, how to practice properly, some teaching scenarios for those people who are a little into the teaching side of things, and body motion, club delivery, all of that sort of stuff. So we think it's a really valuable resource. We get a lot of positive feedback from people. But if anyone wants to try it and then they find that it's not valuable to them, then please contact me, and I'd rather give you your money back and have you as a happy camper than saying, no, that this is not very good. Not that we've had anyone like that. But
I was going to say, I can't imagine that happens very often, if at all.
Yeah. So,
yeah, no, that's, I mean, it's, I still remember sitting next to you, whatever meeting we were at in Chicago, and you were talking me through it. I'm like, what? $6? Holy smokes. I lose more than that every time I 3-putt.
Yeah. I mean, it's 1.5 coffees at Starbucks, right?
There you go.
Yeah.
And the thing is, and we were talking about this earlier, Rob, is that wedge play is so much more important now, that distance is such a huge thing in golf, and guys are trying to hit it so much further. It just puts even more emphasis on having this part of your game like spot on, because if not, you're just wasting that extra distance.
Yeah, that's a great point, Diane. Well said. Hitting it so far, and if you're not good with your wedge, you just lose that advantage pretty quickly.
Yeah, I'm just so impressed by the work that you and Layne have put in to really uncover some truth to, you know, just what's such an important part of the game that I just don't think, I don't think the golf world has ever had such a clear understanding of what really needs to happen.
That's a great compliment, Liam. I really appreciate that.
Well, it's that, you know, there's not many people out there that put the work in, so it definitely needs to be recognized. It's nice not to have to guess about wedge play anymore.
Great. Well, that might be a good place to stop. I'd really like to thank you again, Liam and Diane, for hosting the workshop today, the webinar today. And if there's any time in the future that we can help out, Layne and I are happy to jump in and be good friends of you and Foresight.
Awesome. That's, yeah, again, much appreciated. Phenomenal information. I got a few extra things in my notebook, and I'm heading out to the range later on today. So I got a couple of new things to work on.
Don't forget to use the good golf balls.
Yeah,
All
well,
right.
thanks so much, and we'll be in touch, and hopefully we'll be able to team up and do something with you guys again soon.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Diane.
Thanks
Thank
again,
you.
Rob.